Hi, I'm Valerie, and you're listening to The Beauty Brains. Welcome to The Beauty Brains, a show where real cosmetic chemists answer your beauty product questions and give you an insider's look at the cosmetic industry. This is episode 400. I'm your host, Valerie George, and with me today is Perry Romanowski. Hi, Perry.
Hey, Valerie. Good to see you again.
I can't believe we made it to 400.
I know, 400 episodes. Well, you and I are like 300.
235.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. But, still incredible the show has made it, because without me, without you, we wouldn't be here.
I know. And the best episodes really were after episode 166.
Sorry, Randy. Well, on today's show, it's going to be an amazing show. We have lots of questions that we're going to cover, including how does different water affect the performance of hair products? Do you really need to reapply sunscreen every 2 hours? Can rinse out conditioner and a deep conditioner or mask be used interchangeably? Does the Avene makeup removing micellar water really work? And finally, are 20 free or 12 free nail polishes safer? But first, inane chit chat.
Valerie, I'm back from my big trip overseas.
How was it?
Oh, it was wonderful. I went to Italy, and first of all, I crushed it at my talk.
That's good.
I only say that because at the end I got a good applause, but maybe that was because I juggled at the end.
It's possible. Not many people can juggle or joggle.
Yeah, you don't usually expect to see that at the end of a scientific talk, but so I always like to end with something like that just to ensure that I do get a few cheers. But the talk was fun. It was actually a pretty good conference, and what they do is they take talks that were posters at IFSCC Congress, and then they'd get turned into papers, or presentations. So it was pretty good overall.
What was your talk about?
My talk was just about the future of formulating and how that's going to impact cosmetic chemists, about whether, is there still going to be a cosmetic chemist job in 10 years, considering that an AI right now, you can, not quite right now, but I could imagine in just a few years, you could write, I want a product that does this and it has these things, and then it would just spit out a formula.
I'm sure you could get a formula that way. I think the technology is going to advance, but the challenge is there are so many nuances that come from knowledge that AI can't find on the internet. It's just not there because you're in a product evaluation salon analyzing the product. You learn all these things that maybe don't get published. And I think AI relies on user input to get that information. And I don't know who's just going to cough up all those trade secrets into some kind of software.
I totally agree with you. For the most part, there's still going to always be required some chemists to get some of the nuance. It's just that before you used to hire 10 chemists, whereas now maybe you can hire, one or two. Fewer.
I think a lot of facilities will rely on it to make products, but I think the difference between, a shampoo and a good shampoo will be in the human.
Yeah. Well, hopefully.
And I just find, the more people rely on AI, the less they actually learn. I teach a class at the University of California, Riverside in their extension program, and I can totally tell when people go to ChatGPT to get an answer, because it's like literally I put the answer on a slide.
Right.
And I gave you the slides. It's an open book test. And you went to ChatGPT and pulled up a bunch of nonsense that doesn't even make sense.
Yeah.
What did you learn? You couldn't even learn to go look at the slide that has the answer that you could copy and paste.
Yeah, absolutely. And you are so right that these AIs are trained with bad information. They're trained with a lot of good information, but they're also trained with bad information. And so what you get left is not always accurate, which is always the same. That's the same as true of like professional chemists that you work with in the lab. There's a lot of chemists out there that believe stuff that's not right, and then they just pass it on along. And we see that in things quoted in social media and stuff all the time. I'm like, that's not right. But so humans are giving you wrong information, But these AIs come off like they're completely trustworthy. Like a calculator, you would never doubt if you put in something in a calculator that it's not the right answer, right? You'd never doubt
Except
that.
for when I had a concussion. I
What?
wasn't sure if the answer was correct.
But
because still you have to use some reasoning. Like,
Sure.
does that seem right?
Right.
And with the Chat GPT, you can't unless you're really using critical thinking skills. And what I guess is it comes down to is people just aren't spending that time to use critical thinking skills and say, hey, does that sound correct?
Absolutely. I think AIs are certainly going to make human beings dumber unless you specifically don't let it. I know there's some people like they don't memorize things anymore because why do you need to? And I think that really degrades our ability to remember stuff. And people don't use maps anymore. They just use the Google, tracking or whatever.
I know people who use GPS for the same route every day. And I'm
Right.
like, but you drive it every day.
Right.
Or people who don't know directions, like, oh, now I'm driving north.
I know. And it's making people dumber. And maybe it doesn't matter if you always have your GPS. It doesn't matter. But sometimes that stuff goes out. Like when I was in Italy and you're in the mountains and you're like, I don't want to turn on my cell phone because they charge me like $10 a day. So I just leave it in airplane mode and it's free. All I got to do is find Wi-Fi. And that works until, you're in the mountains and it doesn't work. So.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness. Well, thank goodness you have your memory castles.
Exactly. So I think I love AI. I like to use it, but it does make you dumber. So that's why I keep my brain trained.
Yeah, you have to, especially as you age.
So while I was gone, what were you up to?
Well, Perry, I've just been hanging out being pregnant.
What?
Yeah.
Get out of here.
Oh, you knew, but our listeners didn't.
Yes.
Being very pregnant, but I'm almost across the finish line. So
yeah. Well, that'll be fun. I mean, that's kind of is the explanation for why you had to skip a few trips and such.
Yeah. But, we're almost there. It's been fine. It's very hot now in Texas. And,
oh, boy.
The baby is very large for his age.
Oh.
And very, large stomach and head and stuff.
Sure.
So it's just making me a little tired. I'm a high energy person. And it's very hard to be high energy when you already have 7 pounds in your stomach and you've got a little bit to go.
Oh, boy. Yeah, that'll be fun for you. And then, and it's got to be great. Hot summer in Texas, being pregnant. Wow, that sounds fun.
Well, I'm definitely not wearing shoes, so I'm also barefoot. But what's been interesting, when people, especially like in the industry, because, we've kept it very private, Mr. Cosmetic Chemist and I don't allow visitors over. And, it's just been from the shoulders up on Zooms and that kind of stuff.
Sure.
But it's been interesting because when people do find out, they say, oh, well, are there any products you've been avoiding now that you're pregnant?
Right.
And the answer is no. Because, well, one, I don't do retinoids anyway. That probably is a product that I would avoid, especially given vitamin A toxicity is real, especially with little babies and stuff. Sal acid, I have used a little bit here and there. I'm not using tons, right? It's just a little bit. So I'm not too concerned about it. But everything else is like pretty safe.
Yeah, I think especially for someone who's pregnant and looking on the internet for stuff, there's so much stuff out there that can scare you, but it's not really based on evidence. It's just based on, keeping people anxious and scared for whatever reason. I guess it makes you buy products more.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I've gotten my nails done. I'm not hanging out in salons that have a ton of fumes or anything. I'm going to like pretty good places, but I do that anyway, even pre-pregnancy. Right. So yeah, I've just been doing my thing and, I might disappear for a couple weeks coming up.
Sure. That'll be fun for you. Maybe we'll just get a report here and there, but so that'll be just a couple of weeks away.
Yep. So you've known the whole time, and some people may be wondering, like, why did you keep it a secret? Well, one, despite common belief on the podcast where we share a lot of stuff, I'm a pretty private person, but also, you just never know who is out there. But the reason the cat's out of the bag now, I wasn't going to say anything, but I have a customer of mine who threw a baby shower for me. It was very nice. Yeah, and we had a lot of fun. And they posted some stuff on their Instagram. And a couple Beauty Brains listeners follow them, it turns out. And they were like, wait, what? So, yeah, here I am. I was like, I might as well just stop being a weirdo and tell everybody.
Well, it's not that weird. Like you said, we don't share everything. But this is a pretty big one. So congratulations, and we're looking forward to meeting the new baby.
And it turns out Pretty Kitty and I were pregnant at the same time, except she had her babies. I haven't seen them.
Oh, no.
I don't know what's going on. I've seen her, but not them.
Her? Oh, okay. Well, there you go. Well, when I got home from Italy and we were gone for almost 2 weeks, all of the porch kitties were waiting for me. So they're happy that I'm back.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Well, let's head over to some beauty news. There was also a lot going on while you were away.
Well, Valerie, I saw this article published in New York Magazine, and it reminded me of you because you did a whole thing on peptides for someone in Australia.
Well, that was the New Zealand radio show. And then I also did Slate Magazine interviewed me extensively about peptides.
That's right. You're nearly the industry go-to person for peptides. That's why I was reading this article in the New York The Strategist, and I didn't see Valerie's name here, but I did see some other cosmetic chemist that they quoted, which, he said some decent enough things, but I thought we could look at, there were some things that I'm not sure that I would agree with, but one of the questions they asked was, do you need a peptide moisturizer?
I would say need is a strong term.
Yeah. I think
you don't need anything.
No, exactly. Especially if you're young, it's, I don't know. So do you need a peptide? I can understand how when you're like a cosmetic chemist and you're talking to a reporter and you're like, hey, do you really need this? Nobody wants to just talk to the guy who's like, no, this is all crap, they need to...
Is that why you weren't interviewed?
Exactly. Probably. That's why I pass the interviews off to other people. But I think you need a moisturizer. I agree, you need a moisturizer unless you want skin like mine where, it's too much trouble to do moisturizing. But, I mean, I don't take grooming advice from me. You take product advice, but not grooming advice.
Well, I think peptides do things. I actually studied peptides when I was in grad school for different purposes, but they're biologically active molecules. They can penetrate into skin. Even if they have a larger molecular size, they can get tricked into penetrating into skin. They're called Trojan peptides. And I think there's a lot of clinical data in vitro for sure. That they do things. And the data for in vivo efficacy, meaning on a live person, unfortunately it comes from the raw material supplier. So you do have to take it with a little bit of grain of salt. They're only going to show you the best stuff. But I do think they work. Now, if you only used a moisturizer without peptides, would you be okay? Absolutely. I don't think you have to have them, but I think in certain instances they can be beneficial. And here's another misconception.
Sure.
People think a moisturizer has to be loaded with peptides. I actually saw a brand saying, oh, other brands sprinkle tiny amounts of peptides in, not us. We put tons in. It's like, well, you actually don't need a ton because they are biologically active. So most of the studies are done at 0.1%, 0.05%, 0.01% active peptide. Very tiny quantities.
Right. Small amounts can be effective sometimes. Just more does not necessarily mean better. And then there was one other part here, which the claim was that the one that has the most evidence behind it is Matrixyl 3000. Would you agree with that one there?
No, I actually think it's copper tripeptide 1 because it comes from the pharmaceutical industry. There's so much data behind that particular peptide. It's been around since the 70s. Matrixyl didn't come into play until the early 90s, I would say. So from a use in cosmetics perspective, I would say it's very popular. It's one of the original ones.
Sure.
It does have a lot of supplier data behind it. I would agree if that were the angle, but to say it's the most studied, it's copper tripeptide 1.
Yeah, I'd agree there. And well, one other thing here is like the question is, well, what do you look for? And the suggestion was to look at the data that's out there. But I just don't think that kind of evidence. I just don't think that kind of advice is terribly helpful for consumers, because really the only evidence that you're going to see is marketing stuff from the people trying to sell you this, and whether it's the brand that is selling the product, or it's the raw material supplier that's selling it too. So unless you're going to go to PubMed or something like that, or be lied to by an AI, Gemini or ChatGPT, I don't think you're going to really have access to the data there. And so I'm not sure how helpful that is to look up data.
No, and the other thing is, like, a peptide isn't the only ingredient in a product. So there's going to be other things doing the work, even if you have a placebo control in your study where you have the exact same formula with and without the peptide. I think you're just going to be hard pressed to say, wow, the benefit is so much more.
Yeah.
Or other things weren't influenced. And then the other thing, this is actually why I got into hair, Perry, is that you have to hope this stuff pays off. But here's the thing. You're not going to remember 30 years from now if this peptide serum was the thing that did the job, or if it even did the job, because you have like no baseline, like you're going to age no matter what. It's not like hair, which is an instantaneous effect.
Yeah. I mean, one of the reasons that I don't really spend much time, I mean, it's probably just because I'm too lazy, or I don't care that much. But on like facial stuff, it's like, okay, your face will look good, and then when you're 70, there's a point where your face is just gonna be old and leathery, no matter how much you treat it.
Now, I will say that I look a lot younger than people my age.
Sure.
A lot of people think I'm 10 years younger than I am, and I have to say that's from wearing sunscreen, and not just wearing sunscreen, but conducting sun safety. Like, I don't wrinkle my face in the sun. I don't go out in the sun. I wear a hat. I'm under an umbrella. It's just doing that kind of stuff. So I'll say SPF probably is the best thing you could do for your skin.
I completely agree with that.
Well, I saw a article in Forms Deluxe. I think it's French, so it would be Form Deluxe. I'm not sure. Anyway.
Form de Lou?
I was featured once. It's a new beauty publication. They're doing a pretty good job. But they published an article about the troubling world of dupe fragrances. And I just kind of thought, well, it's not just the fragrance world that gets duped. I mean, sure, it's pervasive. Like, you might not necessarily be able to afford a Creed fragrance, for example. So you could go, at least in the 90s, you could go to Kmart, and it was like, if you love Creed, you'll love Breed. They would have a knockoff that smelled like In the Vein, but not really the same. But I thought, it's not just fragrances that undergo the dupe problem, if you think it is a problem. Really, every industry has knockoffs, right? Like, how many car brands are inspired by the look of Range Rover? So they kind of model their car to look like a Range Rover or a Bentley. Or clothing, I would say this problem is really pervasive as well. And with beauty, it's no different in terms of non-fragrance products. And, the dupe culture on one hand is like prized, because it's like, wow, giving access to people who have, affordable alternatives. Like, Sarah Bellum and I, on the last episode, talked through actual products, and, she recommended e.l.f. I picked up a couple based on our listener feedback from Instagram, and they're dupes of more expensive stuff. And, it's pretty cool. Right. But, I mean, is it a problem? What do you think?
I don't really think it's a problem, especially a dupe is really just, I mean, they've been done forever, right? When you go to like a Walgreens and you see Pantene there, and then right next to it is, the Walgreens brand, but it's like, it's white and it has similar, and like...
They're called national brand equivalents, yeah.
Right. Or Equate is another brand that you find at grocery stores.
Up by Target.
Right.
Equate is Walmart, Up is Target.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, yeah. So all those stores already do it, and the cosmetic chemists just are given that product, and they say, can you knock this one off? Or we used to call it knocking off.
Yeah.
Or dupe is what everyone calls it now. I would say for things like fragrance, though, fragrances are a little harder to dupe, because people's sense of smell is a lot more refined than their sense of touch and feel and such. And so I can give you two shampoos that are pretty close, but if I had the same fragrance in them, then you're going to think they're the same thing, even though they're pretty far apart if you're like a trained shampooer thing. But I could give you two odors that are pretty close, but your nose is much better at saying, oh, they're definitely different.
Something's different, yeah.
Yeah.
The reason I don't think it's necessarily... Well, it's not that I don't think it's an issue. I don't know why everyone's getting their panties in a twist. Because on one hand, like, that's how brands are built.
Right.
How many times have you been approached by someone, you don't have a lab anymore, but I get approached all the time. Oh, I love this product and I want to recreate it, but recreate it a little different. Right. Every product, even when I worked at, a major brand, it was like, oh, well, we have to make this new product now and the market leader is this. So let's take everything what they've done, but make it different, improve upon it. You're still using someone else's work to essentially duplicate it and modify it. Or sometimes, honestly, it was just like, you just have to knock this product off or reverse engineer it. And everyone's doing it, but when it comes to something like this, they're like, ugh, dupes are such a problem. And I'm like, you can't tell me you haven't ripped off someone else's work.
Right. I mean, everybody, like, they say that even there's only like 7 stories that ever been told, and they're all just kind of repackaged and told in a slightly different way, but the stories are all been told. I think most, like, cosmetics have all been made. I mean, we all have the same ingredients, so it's just all subtle twists on something that's already been done. There hasn't been any huge breakthroughs in, like, forever.
No, not really. So I don't know why, just like forward-facing, everyone was like, oh my God, this troubling world. And then it's like behind, they're like, so this new product launched, what are we going to do?
Right. And, there are some specific brands that, we called it the fast follower. Mm-hmm. Where you would have, say, Herbal Essence launches a shampoo SKU that was selling really well, and they were selling for like $3 a bottle. VO5 would say, all right, let's knock that one off and sell you the same thing, but for 99 cents.
Exactly.
And there's a market for that. So it's been around forever.
Well, speaking of SPF, I think you actually saw a couple things.
I did. I saw this article published in The Cut about sunscreen myths. And, the 10 sunscreen myths, interesting enough. And, you can't layer mineral and chemical sunscreens. They call that a myth. Right, you can layer that stuff. Can you mix sunscreen into your foundation? I think a lot of these ones we kind of covered on previous shows. Mm-hmm. So we won't go over them there. But there was one thing that I saw on here that was a tool that called the Sunscreen Decoder. And I was curious about it, so I went to and I'll put a link in the show notes, but it's a Sunscreen Decoder. And I'm looking at this, and I'm sure the website makers are sincere and they want to help people, but they put this tool in, and it says, analyze the sunscreen screener. It says, paste your sunscreen ingredient list here, and we'll analyze it. And when I do that, it just says what the active sunscreen is, and then it says inactive ingredients. I'm like, how is this helping anybody?
I also did it, and I found it unhelpful.
Yeah, the article says they launched Sunscreener is a free online platform designed to help shoppers decode sunscreen formulas. Now, if you were going to make something to help a consumer decode a formula, like a sunscreen formula, what would you have in it? I mean, you certainly have to have something more than just, oh, here's the active ingredients and here's the inactive ingredients. Right?
Well, I mean, yeah, the drug facts box tells you that. Yeah. I mean, I think it's challenging because there were some other things in this article which I really disagreed with from a formulation and regulatory perspective and what brands are doing, having worked at brands and having worked at brands that have made SPF products.
Right.
It's very nuanced. It's hard to tell. You just can't say, well, here's your active stuff, they're chemical filters. Here's your stuff, they're mineral filters.
Right.
So many things that are not ingredients go into determining the SPF and the efficacy and the longevity of the product.
Yeah.
And it's not just, they're accusing brands of using these boosters and like lying to, consumers about it. It really is like particle size and particle size distribution and what type of film was left on the skin, the polarity of the emollients in the product.
Right,
There's so many things. A little tool like this isn't going to be beneficial to you. Even if it could detect all those nuances, at the end of the day, it comes down to SPF testing.
Right. Ultimately, that is what matters. And so if the SPF is on there, I mean, if they're using reputable testing labs and they're doing it the right way, you're going to get a number that should be reliable. But what it also comes down to is, how do you like how it feels? Like, you can't read the back of a bottle and say, oh, you're going to like how this feels because of these ingredients. No, you have to actually test it yourself. So I don't know. I don't find the sunscreener terribly helpful, and I'm just not sure that consumers, you get more misled than you get informed by looking at stuff that isn't helpful.
Well, especially since consumers already have this notion, and the brand doesn't do this, by the way, but consumers already have this notion that chemical sunscreens are terrible for you.
Right.
And so to actually call that out, I think if someone already has this bias in their mind, just reaffirms, but they probably would already know the answer. It would be cool to have wow, avobenzone is really great in UVA protection.
Right.
Whereas, it has to have a stabilizer. Oh, the stabilizer's here, and really kind of breaking it down for the consumer in that way to show why the formula could be really great.
And it seems to me the more information that you give consumers, you just start to overload them with stuff they don't really need to know about. I know sometimes I sound like the advocate for stay ignorant people, but sometimes you don't need to know everything, because knowing more can make you more, make you more worried, make you just lead you to bad decisions.
Especially if you don't understand the full context or reasoning behind it, and you can't always go internet sleuth that. Right? A lot of it's learned from other people or being in the industry and working at a corporation.
So my advice, when you're picking a sunscreen, first look for the SPF. You want something broad spectrum. It's got UVB, UVA also. And then you just got to try it.
Oh, yeah. Well, let's head to some beauty questions. Our first question comes to us from Magdalena. Hi, Valerie and Perry. First of all, I'm a longtime listener and lover of the podcast. I'm an esthetician, and I'm so grateful for the education your show provides. I recommend it to all the other beauty professionals I know.
Nice.
I would love for my two favorite chemists to help me understand the differences between water, specifically hard water and soft water. I've spent most of my life showering in tap water, not thinking much about it. However, I recently stayed at my partner's family home and was shocked to experience their water. They have a water softening system installed in their house. They love the feel of soft water. I can't stand it. I feel like I'm showering in conditioner. I feel slimy and like I can't get clean. I was so baffled they would choose this soft water lifestyle that I started doing some research into it. Then I realized I need some Beauty Brains help to understand what is going on with the soft water. How would you explain the difference or what is happening?
Okay, basically, hard water has magnesium and calcium ions in it, and soft water, you switch it off for sodium and potassium ions. So it's just kind of a swap there. That's what these filters are doing. And the reason that hard water feels harder is, I guess, those metal ions can interact with your detergents, and they can reduce the cleansing ability of those detergents, so your hair or your skin doesn't feel as squeaky clean, I guess. And so basically the soft water is going to feel, I guess, more gentle, or as you say, slippery and slimy.
Yeah. The calcium and magnesium in tap water, we'll call it, from really anywhere. All municipalities have calcium and magnesium present. They can interact with your detergents and form like a scum. On your bathtub, or maybe like a little crust on your shower head. You can sometimes notice it. But like Perry said, they swap them out for a different type of ion. Sodium and potassium are not divalent, they're monovalent metals. And they don't have that same type of impact on skin or hair. And it's interesting because this is something I notice as well too. And I mentioned it a couple episodes ago, maybe with the cerebellum episode, I'm not sure, where I was like, there's products I loved in Los Angeles I can't stand them in Texas. They just don't work the same on my hair. And it really is a water quality difference.
And it could be, it's kind of complicated about what specific chemical interactions are going on there. But just suffice it to say that there are some going on there that for someone who's perceptible enough, they might be able to notice differences. Now, I will say it could also kind of just be, if you're given that knowledge, and so you kind of bias yourself. So there might not be much going on chemically, but if you're told, oh, this is hard water, you're going to start to feel something like that. And that kind of brings us to that shower head question.
Magdalena had another question with this. What are your thoughts on the shower head water filters? My understanding is they're supposed to be installed like a regular shower head and filter the water as you shower, which is supposed to be beneficial to hair and skin. I was very skeptical of such devices and doubtful that a shower head would have noticeable impact. However, I was gifted a Jolie shower head about a year ago and pretty much immediately noticed a difference in how my hair felt after showering once I started using it. I think I even feel a difference between a fresh filter and one that's at the end of its life. I'm not sure if it's placebo or actually doing something, so I'm curious on your take on filtered shower heads. Thank you so much for all you do to keep us brainy about beauty.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not like a shower head expert, but we use reverse osmosis to deionize water and such, and those last for a pretty long time. Although a shower, our deionizers had these gigantic filters, and a shower head is just going to be kind of.
And they're meant to do hundreds of gallons, right?
What's a shower? How much water do you think you use about there?
I'm going to guess 10 gallons.
Okay. Well, I think in looking that up, 10 to 25 gallons.
Oh, wow. Wait. So, yeah, that shower filter is very small. So to handle that much water continuously, I don't think they have a long lifespan.
Right. So it would make sense maybe you notice it right in the beginning, but that's going to get used up, in one or maybe 2 or 3 showers. I would expect it's not really doing much at all after that, right?
Yeah.
So
the problem I have with these shower heads is, again, you might notice a difference in feel.
Right.
For sure. And if you have really damaged hair and you have a hard water problem, you're really going to notice an improvement in your hair when you switch to a filter. But I would probably recommend having a water softening system installed in your home.
Yeah.
Just from a price point, just because those filters are so expensive.
Yeah. And you might also be noticing something right away when you switch filters because you know how expensive it was. So you're going to start noticing, right? I don't know.
Yeah. So bottom line, does Magdalena have to worry about different waters? And do we think she should keep using the filter?
I would say that I don't think the sliminess that you're getting from your soft water, it's not bad. It is different, so it's not surprising. The shower heads, they're kind of just these gadgets, which they're not like magic wands, and they probably don't work very long if they do work at all. But if you like how it's doing, it's fine. I
would pass on the shower head.
Yeah, I would too.
And focus on the water for the home. That's what I would do.
Well, yeah, the shower head, it seems like a pain in the... I don't know. I wouldn't use it. But if you were gifted it, you try it. It does... There is some legitimacy to that. You could have an effect on you. I mean, honestly, I think most people wouldn't notice differences anyway. I think it's pretty subtle. But if somebody notices a difference, there's a reason possibly that they would.
Exactly.
Our next question comes to us from Jamie. Hi, guys. You're wonderful, and I've learned so much. I have a question about chemical versus mineral sunscreens. Oh, tying back into our news thing. I put on mineral SPF in the morning, the ELTAMD.
EltaMD, Perry. And Sarah Bellum is using this sunscreen. That's so embarrassing.
EltaMD. Okay, EltaMD. Before work, I work a desk job, and I asked my dermatologist RN if it's really necessary to apply or to reapply every 2 hours, provided I haven't sweated it off. She said for mineral, no, but if it sits on top of the skin for a chemical sunscreen, it is necessary because they break down. This kind of contradicts everything I've heard, but I really don't like reapplying every 2 hours when all I'm doing is sitting in front of a screen, then talking or taking a walk at lunchtime. This is especially true for tinted sunscreens because they usually just make you look oily and orange if you apply more. Is what she said true? My question doesn't really pertain to going outside or exercise or hike where you'll be sweating. I get that. I know to slather myself in those areas. Also, what do you think of those powdered sunscreens such as Color Science? I have dry skin and am hesitant to add powder throughout the days, even though that's an easy way to apply every 2 hours. And then the Elta MD, the ELTA MD, that I wear is the UV Restore 40. Finally, my last part of the question, boy, she filled in all of these questions, and that's okay.
So smart. Jamie's so smart.
My husband believes UV can't penetrate glass. Is this true? I'm specifically asking about our old house windows and car windows. Thanks so much, Jamie. All right, lots to unpack there. Let's start with the Elta MD. Do you got to reapply that?
Well, I don't think you need to reapply SPF if you're just sitting, let's say, in a room.
Right.
Like I'm doing right now.
Sure.
You're not, yes, you have oil secretions going on.
Sure.
And there's some natural light coming into my room. But your sunscreen is not decomposing.
Right.
It's not degrading. There's stabilizers in it.
Yeah.
You're not getting intense UV exposure. And so for me, I think, would I notice a difference 30 years from now if I applied it or not? No, and so I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
But there is a reason the back of the sunscreen bottle says to reapply every 2 hours.
And that reason is regulations, right?
Yeah, the testing methodology.
Right, exactly.
And the rules.
Yeah. So that's why that's there. Now, do you really, and, lots of people on social media will tell you, oh, you have to reapply, but honestly, as to what the RN was saying, no, the chemical sunscreens indoors are not chemically breaking down over time like that. They break down, I would agree, they get used up if they absorb UV light and they...
In extreme sun, but
right.
not in an indoor office environment.
Exactly. And I would also say that while the mineral sunscreens sort of have a different interactions and they don't chemically degrade in the same way, the problems isn't necessarily the degradation of just the UV blocker. It's also the film forming and such. And if you're moving around and such, you're going to cause gaps in that film on your skin. And that's really the more important reason why you would want to reapply. So that's going to apply whether it's a organic chemical sunscreen or an inorganic mineral sunscreen.
Exactly. So in an office, my personal belief is you don't need to reapply every 2 hours. You could use something like Color Science, which is a powdered product that dispenses through a brush. There's a couple brands that have this type of powder apparatus, including Brush on Block and Hustle Beauty. But is it an effective way to get SPF coverage? I would say you're not going to realize the SPF on the packaging.
Right.
Because the SPF testing methodology, I think, is 2 milligrams per square centimeter
or something.
Yeah,
some ridiculous amount.
Yeah, so that's a lot of powder.
Yeah.
If you were to weigh out 2 milligrams on a scale and think about just 1 little centimeter on your face. So you really would have to put a ton on. Now, would it help a little tiny bit? Maybe. But again, if you're inside in an office, I just don't think you need to add that powder. Now, especially if you're also wearing makeup on top of the sunscreen.
Right.
I think you're actually okay because iron oxides in tinted foundation at least help remove visible light exposure, which you are exposed to in an office.
Right.
And visible light actually can cause hyperpigmentation in skin as well as other problems. But in terms of UV protection, I think you're fine to just put on the Elta MD Clear UV Restore 40 once.
Sure.
And go.
Especially indoor. And, a lot of that makeup uses titanium dioxide anyway as part of the base. And that's a sunscreen.
Yeah. Now, if you wanted to throw some powder on for your commute home, I could see doing that. Okay, I'm going outside now. Let me throw it on.
Sure.
But I don't know about that.
I mean, really, like you say, in 30 years, are you going to say, oh, I didn't do this and I noticed a difference? I'm like, probably not. All right,
What about this part with the glass? I actually learned this in physics in high school. So
yeah, well,
I'm glad I at least had this because I
sure.
felt like it's helped me with aging a little bit.
Yeah, her husband isn't exactly wrong, but I don't think he's totally right. It depends on what he said, but does glass block UV? It blocks some of UV. It doesn't block
Exactly.
it all. Right. So
it blocks UVB rays, the burning rays. So you actually can't burn through the windows, but you could age through the windows. Like UVB, UVA. Yeah.
Right. It doesn't block UVA, which is the one that causes tanning, and it also is the one that's suspected in causing
skin
melanoma.
cancer.
So, yeah. So
look at me. I'm worried about the superficial stuff, but yes, also.
Well, nobody wants to be burned either. So yeah, so yes and no is the answer there. So if you're sitting in front of a big sunny window all day, you are getting some UVA rays exposure, and so your sunscreen is helping you in that regard.
Provided it's broad spectrum and it has a really great UVA coverage zone.
Right.
Otherwise, it's not.
Right. So if that was
there's that.
If that was a debate between you and your husband, I think both of you can declare victory.
Well, I'll tell you another interesting thing, Perry. Since I learned that in high school, I've actually been very cautious about wearing driving gloves.
Oh.
And, of course, wearing my SPF. I did that before that anyway. But I even had, not on the car I have now, but it's on my list to go get done. And it's something I keep forgetting about. But I actually had a UV film put on the windshield of the car. It's not tinted.
Sure.
But to help block additional UV rays coming in from the UVA spectrum.
I mean, no wonder you look 10 years younger.
Isn't that crazy? And then I got a crack in my windshield and I was like, well, there went that.
You know what you can do?
Come with the new windshield. You got to redo it.
Crack, you can just put a little sunscreen there, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, my goodness.
You know what? I love that driving gloves idea. In fact, I love driving with gloves on. And in fact, I would bring it back, but my wife thinks it looks dumb, especially in the summer.
It kind of does, but mine are, skin colored,
sure.
So you can pick what shade looks great for you. No. But mine have the fingertips cut off because I don't like my fingertips being covered.
Oh, see, I do it because I have this nervous habit of picking at the skin around my fingers while I'm driving, so that stops me from doing that. So.
Oh yeah, you need the fingertipped ones.
Right. So yeah, but I like the nice black gloves in the middle of summer. It's kind of odd.
Oh my gosh. Well, our next question comes to us from a patron, Lisa. What's the difference between using a rinse out conditioner and a deep conditioner or mask? Can they be used interchangeably? Does one work better than the other on regularly heat styled hair?
I suspect, Valerie, that you and I might have differing opinions on this one.
Your opinion is just throw VO5 on it, and that is not an answer.
That's not my answer. My answer really is, as a consumer, you can't really know, because there are some brands out there that will just take one or two versions of their conditioner, make it thicker, and then call it a
VO5.
I don't work for VO5 anymore, so I can't say that's true. But back when I did work for them, that's what we did. And we did that. You would take just the standard conditioner, add twice as much cetyl and sterile alcohol so it would get thicker, and you call it a 3-minute miracle or something like that. And it worked perfectly fine. So some brands can do that. Now other brands don't. Other brands maybe look at it a little bit more nuanced and will change up the formulas a bit more.
That's what we did. So for us at the salon brand that I worked at, a conditioner was, had a specific water content to it. So it wasn't too rich, too heavy, unless the product category it fell in required it to be richer or heavy. So for example, a volumizing conditioner was very lightweight. A conditioner for coarse, dry hair, maybe would be a little more substantive.
Right.
But that doesn't mean it was more conditioning per se. But when we went to develop a mask or a deep conditioner,
sure,
in air quotes, we would change up the formula. We would most notably reduce the water content, which would make it thicker. Like Perry said, usually increase your thickening agents because it also adds to that consumer perception. But then we would, maybe enhance the heaviness or the occlusiveness on the hair. So at least felt a little bit richer. And maybe it was doing more conditioning. But from a basic conditioning perspective, they're probably similar.
Right. I think what we kind of discovered was that consumers can't really tell a difference. And so the big difference in the, like, ultimately you use a product and at the end of the day on a blinded basis you can't tell a difference. And so ultimately we went with cost of goods and keeping it down, and it becomes more of a marketing story that drives your perception than like a chemistry thing.
Now, if I had regularly heat styled hair, I would probably use a mask more often instead of a conditioner. So I would shampoo and then I would put the mask on and leave it on a longer time. Presumably the mask would have a higher oil content, more silicones, that kind of stuff.
Now, wearing that mask is not to keep it out of your eyes, right?
Oh my goodness. So yeah, I would use it, rinse it off in the shower, and then I definitely would be supplementing with a heat protectant.
Yeah.
Hopefully you're already doing that, and this will help reduce the amount of breakage in your hair by using things that are both extra conditioning in the shower and then protecting heat left on the hair. Because if you regularly heat style your hair, you're probably getting a lot of breakage and mechanical damage.
Here is one area where I say looking at the labels can be very telling. So if the brand happens to be doing the trick that we used to do on the brand I worked on of just taking the standard formula and zhuzhing it up a little bit and calling it an intensive or deep conditioner, it had very similar ingredient lists. And so if you look at a brand that has a mask and they have a deep conditioner and the ingredient lists are pretty similar, they're probably doing that same thing.
That's a great tip.
Hey, we got an audio question.
Hi, Beauty Brains. I've got a question about something I got at the dermatologist office. It's Avene makeup removing micellar water. And my question is, what do you think about this stuff? And in particular, the fact that it's strong enough to take off makeup, but it says you don't even have to rinse it off. Is it doing anything for my skin, or what the heck is it doing? Thanks so much.
All right, Catherine's Avene makeup remover micellar water. You're a big Micelle fan, are you, or user? Or?
Well, I've used them.
Okay.
Am I a fan? Nah, I just personally prefer rinse-off cleansers. So typically with a micellar water, are you familiar with them?
I am familiar with them. What L'Oreal had one, and I remember Sarah Bellum saying that she loved the L'Oreal micellar when it came out. Although I don't know if she's still using it, so maybe that was kind of a fatty kind of a thing.
To me, I thought it would be a fad. I'm actually still surprised people use them. But basically what they are is water. And they put a little bit of surfactant or solubilizer in it.
Sure, yeah.
And you literally just soak a cotton pad and you wipe it on your skin and you don't rinse it off.
Ah.
And the idea is the surfactants or solubilizers in the water at a very small amount will wipe away some of the oil impurities, just saying what brands say, debris, all that kind of stuff. But it's really more like the solubilization and physical wiping. You wouldn't rinse afterwards. And so the reason I don't like it is I'm like, well, what if you're leaving a little surfactant behind? Probably not a big deal, but for me, I'm like, I would just rather use a traditional cleanser and wipe my face.
I'd also think you're leaving makeup behind, right?
Well, that's the premise of Catherine's question. So is it strong enough to take off makeup?
Right.
Without rinsing. And in my opinion, the surfactant level is so low,
right,
that I don't think these are really great makeup removers. If you're relying on it alone to remove makeup and cleanse your face, if you are a heavy makeup wearer, like MAC makeup, for example, is pretty substantive, I don't think it would be strong enough to take off a full face of makeup. Yeah. So I think you would probably be better off double cleansing. And this really, to me, is more for like where you have a lot of skin contact.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think that micellar waters are your power cleansers, at least power enough to remove makeup. But they sell them, so some people like that anyway.
Yeah, and what's interesting is, they say that this product is a makeup removing micellar water. Again, I'm sure it takes off some very light makeup application, but it's just using water, a little bit of solvents, glycerin, pentylene glycol. The surfactants are cocoa glucoside and a solubilizer, polyglycerol 4 caprate, polyglycerol 6 caprolate. which is a very nice lightweight solubilizer. But basically they say in the morning and evening to face and eyes with a cotton pad. Presumably you wouldn't have makeup on in the morning.
Yeah.
If you have to use a fresh cotton pad, repeat, and then finish the cleansing process with a fine mist of Avene thermal spring water. But all their clinical results are not about how well it is removing makeup. It's about skin hydration, and it's no surprise because you're leaving on glycerin and pentylene glycol.
Right. Right. So is it doing anything for your skin? It can have some cleansing effect, but there's probably better options out there.
Exactly. Well, our last question also comes to us from a patron, Misha.
Misha is our newest patron. She just joined.
Oh.
So welcome, Misha.
Well, welcome.
And, being a patron, you get your questions answered, like, real quick. So here's Misha's question.
Are 20 free or 12 free nail polishes any safer? I'm sorry, 20 free. Oh, my God.
Wow.
Are 20 free or 12 free nail polishes any safer than regular nail color in terms of toxicity and absorption?
20. This was all like
20 free.
They're
oh
up
my
to
God.
20 because what was it?
It used to be 3, and then it became 5.
Then 5. Then
and
7.
now I'm surprised to
12.
see
20.
12, 20.
Right. What did the 20 freeze?
You know what? I'm going to come out with a nail polish that's 1,800 chemicals free.
Yeah.
And use the European Union's banned chemical list, where like 1,700 of them would never be used in cosmetics anyway.
Oh, wait. I just see this ad. I looked up 20 free nail polish on Google because I was curious what the 20 are. And the top one comes 30 free nail polish. So I see your 20.
Misha and us, we're not even up to date.
I know. I see your 20, and I raise it to 30. Like,
I'm raising it to 1,800. I'm pulling that EU banned chemical list where it's like, you know what? I didn't put jet fuel in my nail polish.
Right. So
kerosene didn't make it.
So what is the deal with this 30 free or 20 free? What are they free from?
Well, here's the thing. I don't really know, because when the whole free from claim first started out, it was, well, our nail polish doesn't have formaldehyde. It doesn't have toluene. It doesn't have camphor, which I don't know why you would put camphor in nail polish.
Sure.
It doesn't have phthalates. It doesn't have parabens. You wouldn't put parabens in a nail polish anyway.
Right.
They're water-free. But now I feel like they're adding many different new chemicals that absolutely have nothing to do with nail polish.
Well, here, I just found the 30 ingredients that they exclude from their nail polish.
Please read them.
Okay, formaldehyde releasers, okay. All animal-derived ingredients, so no carmine. Sulfonamide, ethyl talsolamide, so xylene, toluene. Okay, so those are the standard ones. Then they say phthalates. That's not... and then acetone, triglycan. Okay.
Why would you put an antibacterial in the nail polish?
Okay. How about this? Hydroquinone. They're not putting...
Okay. You don't want to put a skin lightener in.
They don't put in mineral oils or waxes.
Which you wouldn't put in a nail polish anyway.
They don't put in sulfates.
You wouldn't put sulfates in a nail polish anyway.
EDTA, lead. They don't put lead in.
Well, nail polish doesn't need EDTA,
right?
Because that's a chelating agent. It binds free metals in water. But lead, they can't make that promise because all colorants have lead content.
Right. They're just saying they don't put it in there. Like nobody else puts it in there either. But so they just make up all of these. Anything that sounds scary to people, they're just saying we don't put that in there, even though most of that stuff you weren't going to put in nail polish anywhere. I
also found gluten and palm oil on a separate list.
Oh boy. Well,
or fragrance, thank goodness for that.
So that's what's going on here. So does that get to the question of just not having these things in there make them safer?
No, because at the end of the day, the nail polish is still nail polish. Nail polish is another interesting aspect of cosmetic science in that I feel like you have to learn it from another person, like hair color.
Sure.
And it's not really using like conventional cosmetic chemistry. It's actually utilizing paint chemistry.
Right.
And in order to have paint, which is usually a non-water based material, it has to have things that evaporate into the air so it dries. It has to have polymers so it lays into a uniform film on the nail bed. It has to not be so rigid that it cracks, but not so flexible that it just, kind of falls off. So it's this really delicate balance of ingredients. And so at the end of the day, all nail polishes have those types of things in them. And if ingredient lists were to be disclosed, you would find them to be very, 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 very similar no matter the brand. And so this whole 20 free, 12 free thing, I hope you can see they're talking about things that wouldn't be in nail polish anyway.
And the original things where you're taking out toluene and acetone and formaldehyde stuff, those were found pretty much in everything. But the substitutes there, everybody is using the same substitutes, so you're getting the same kind of effects.
And no one's using toluene anymore, or should be. No one's using formaldehyde anymore because these things are carcinogens and you're not permitted to do that. So there's not really a point of distinction between these brands and the conventional brands you'd find at the market. And in fact, I would say, again, I just hate recommending the bigger brands, but they're probably doing the right thing, and they're probably testing heavy metals for lead content in the pigments. Maybe these other brands aren't.
I will also add, though, that there are only so many manufacturers of nail polish in the world.
It's very niche.
And so everybody's kind of using the same chemicals and the same people are making them. So even though the brands might be different, the manufacturing sites are generally the same.
Exactly. So, Misha, hopefully that answers your question. Don't be scared. Just use the nail polish that works best for you.
Yeah.
I'm going to give a little plug. Look at my nails, Perry. What do you think of the color?
Oh, they look
It's
very
a little
nice.
peachy coral color.
Peachy? Oh, not fun.
So, not me. I get the same color like every time. But I was like, I need to do something different. And I saw this little peach color. And it reminded me of this shirt I wore all the time in 8th grade.
Oh, wow. That's fun.
And I was like, okay, I should get it. It's super fun. But anyway, it's Dazzle Dry, and it doesn't chip for 3 weeks. I've talked about Dazzle Dry before.
Yeah,
I don't get into their free from stuff. I just wear it because it lasts for 3 weeks without chipping.
Yeah, very cool. Now, did you have to do it yourself, or did you get it done?
No, I'm not very good with my hands.
Oh.
And I got a D in art in 8th grade. I'm just not, a person who can color in the lines.
Sure.
I just don't have that type of dexterity, so I get them done.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's hard because especially if you're right-handed, to try to paint with your left hand could be complicated and such.
The other real reason I do paint my own nails sometimes,
Yeah.
And it doesn't look as great as when they really do it. The secret to nail longevity is in the preparation of the nail bed.
Yeah.
So make sure it's being buffed and prepped appropriately, oils removed from it before you apply the different coats. But the real thing is the shaping. I'm not a visual person. And so for me, I have longer nails, they're very thick from genetics. And so they shape really nicely and don't break, but I can't shape them.
Oh,
They don't look the same.
Right. They do not look the same. But it does look the same, or at least sound the same.
The ending of our show. We are out of time.
Yeah, there it is.
Thanks for listening, everybody. If you get a chance, head over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a review. That's going to help other people find the show and ensure we have a full docket of beauty questions to answer.
And speaking of questions, if you have a question, just record it on your smartphone and email to thebeautybrains@gmail.com. Or you can just post it in the form that we have in the show notes, or leave a comment on Buzzsprout or Spotify or wherever. We get questions from all over. And if you want your question answered really quickly, like
Misha
got, you could just become a patron. And if you want to do that and support the show, go to Patreon/thebeautybrains and subscribe at any level. You also get a transcript of the show, and like I said, your questions get a higher priority.
Also, follow us on our various social media accounts. On Instagram, we're at thebeautybrains 2018. On X, we're at thebeautybrains. On Bluesky, we're at thebeautybrains. We have a Facebook page and a TikTok.
And we also have a big congratulations to Valerie. Looking forward to the big event in a couple of weeks.
Oh, well, thank you. And thanks again to our listeners. And remember, be brainy about your beauty.
Thanks, everyone.